Hello again, everyone. In this lesson, we want to go ahead and create a front end for SQL Server. As you saw in the previous lesson, we were trying to add data and it was pretty clumsy doing it directly. So we want to create a front end. We're not going to spend too much time making it too beautiful because we'll have other lessons for that. However, to do that, we need to have a connection mechanism, and what we're going to use will be ODBC, which is short for Open Database Connectivity. This is an open source connectivity that allows applications to connect to any database management system. For instance, if I wanted to, let's say I had Postgres installed here instead of SQL Server, I could go ahead and search for Postgres ODBC, and there'll be plenty of links coming up offering connectivities. As you can see, there are plenty of them right here. This one I clicked on already, which is the official one from Postgres itself. You could go ahead and download it for your Windows machine, for your Mac, etc. ODBC is just, if you think of it as an API that allows applications to connect. Now, ODBC is already installed in here for connection to SQL Server. If I go to Control Panel, I've actually created some, but let's actually take a look at them. I'll delete the ones that I've created. I'm going to go for Setup ODBC in 64-bit. As you can see under System DSN, I have like this one, sys ODBC created. I'm going to remove it right now. And I don't think I've created anything else, but if I have, I can remove those later. Let me see if I created anything under 32-bit possibly. No. So you could go in here and actually make a creation from right here, or you could do it directly from the application if the application supports it. I prefer to do it from right here, so I'm going to go to 64-bit and choose System DSN. That is more generic. And in here, I'm going to create a connection to SQL Server, and this is going to be called sys ODBC. I'm going to use an underscore. Description is ODBC connection to sys database. And the server is going to be our local server, which we can designate with a period or the word local, or you can always type in the IP address of the machine. You can always type in the DNS name of the machine if you're on a network, or in this case, I do actually have the machine name, and I'm going to click next. We want to go ahead and use Windows pass-through authentication, which, as you can see, this one still calls it Windows NT authentication, and I do want to change my database to my sys database. Here we go. And click finish. Let's test to make sure we have connectivity, and we do. That is great. Let's click OK and OK. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run Microsoft Access right here. Let me go ahead and close my ODBC connections. And I'm going to create a blank database, and I'm going to call it sys front, sys application, and let's create that. By default, Access wants to create a table. I don't. I'm going to close it all, and instead I'm going to go to external data and select from my data sources. Notice you have lots of options. Over here we have the option from SQL Server, and down here we have ODBC. It doesn't really matter if I select it here or here, it's going to give me the same dialog box. Here, I'll prove it to you. If I select ODBC, you get this. And if I go and select SQL Server, you get the same thing. So it's just, Microsoft being Microsoft. So I'm going to select the link to the data source. I don't want to import it. If I import it, brings the data in. I just want to have a link to it. And I'm going to go to my machine data sources, and the one that I created was called this one, sys ODBC right here. Let's click OK. And there are my tables, 1, 2, 3, along with a bunch of other tables that were created when we actually created the database. These are not just tables, there are many of them are views that are created. We'll discuss what views are in a different lesson. Okay, so I have my tables. The globe means that it's not local, of course, and the arrow means that it's a link. Now, if I double click course, for instance, you can see that my data shows up. If I double click student, okay, so I get all these deleted. And how about this one? I get all these deleted. So this can happen, unfortunately, and this illustrates the concept that things may not always be compatible as we wish them to be. If I actually save this, let me go down and save it and leave it open. The problem is that for the student and the student course, the primary key that we use for student, if I go back to design view, I set it as a big integer. And this is outside of the range of data that Access can handle. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to integer, which of course it says if you want to preserve the relationships, what it's going to do is it's going to also change it in the corresponding table. I'm going to say yes, please do that. We're perfectly fine. I don't expect to have 2 billion students, and remember integer can go from minus 2 billion to plus 2 billion. I'm going to save this and say yes. Just to be safe, I'm going to right click and design this one, and you can see it was changed to an integer. Now going back to my Access database, if I double click this, you can see that it still shows up as deleted. I'm going to close that, and I'm going to right click the link and choose to basically refresh it. And I'm going to refresh this one also. This one doesn't need it because there was no change done, but what the heck. And now if I double click DBO student, you can see that my data shows up. So this was an example of the data not being compatible between SQL Server and what Microsoft Access can handle. But you can see that we have access to this stuff. If I were to go in and add another student here, Pete P. Puma, I notice I did not put in a student ID, and Pete lives at 202 Forest Lane. Let's say that he lives in Fairfax, Virginia, 22031. And Pete's telephone is 703-555-1212. Pete was born in 1961, January 1st. And Pete's social is 111-226666. You can see that my identity is still keeping track. And I can go to the course table, which I have open right here. I can add a new course. So for instance, I'm going to go ahead and add in English 101, Introduction to Reading. And I will just press the tab key here, and you can see that my default is actually filling in the information. So this is great. We actually made a connection from something that's a lot friendlier to the backend database. I'm going to close this and close this. And let me go ahead and say yes to save all this. There we are. So we actually have a front-end connection. At this point, we have the ability to go under the Create menu and create forms and reports and queries that are in SQL Server, but they're going to be displayed in Access, and we can actually create front-end forms for these tables. Let's just create a quick one just so you get the idea of how it can be done. If I select Form Design and then come over here to the Add Existing Fields and Show All Tables, you can see, for instance, my course table, and I could drag these fields one by one. I can edit them later. But notice right now I'm up here, it says View, and I'm in Design View. I can switch to Form View, and you can see that my form elements are popping in, and I can navigate through them. Okay, I am not going to save this form. I'm going to delete this form. And no, I'm not going to save it because we will have lessons for that later about creating some beautiful forms and making it friendly for the end user. For the time being, I just want you to know that it is possible to make a connection from an application to SQL Server and Access is designed to be the default application. For those of you who might say, well, I have a Mac, how do I connect to SQL Server from a Mac? You can use LibreOffice. LibreOffice does have the ability to create connections to SQL Server, and you can create forms in LibreOffice to make connections. I probably will leave some links in the description about tutorials that you can go to watch for LibreOffice, if that's of interest to you. Okay, that's it for this session. Thank you for being a great audience. I really appreciate it. Please share your knowledge with others, as I always say, and please, if you're enjoying these videos, feel free to share them with your loved ones and friends.